Hello everyone, it's Matt here from Scoop in Response, and today we're going to be looking at another commander which has just been reprinted into Double Masters. It is Animar, Soul of Elements. The card reads, protection from white and black. Whenever you cast a creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Animar, Soul of Elements. And creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each +1 counter on Animar. It's a legendary creature elemental, and it starts as a 1/1, and it's Teamer, so green, blue, and red. Really sweet, versatile commander. It originally got printed quite a few years ago, and we're just going to have a look at a way that you can rebuild the deck now with some of the more recent additions to the format, and basically just see how we can have a good core shell for the deck. Excuse me, to sort of get started with. So as usual, there's all of these cards that I'll be talking about today. None of them are really mandatory unless I say, hey, you probably should include this card. It's not really negotiable. There's a few cards here in the deck that are going to cost a pretty penny, so dual lands and Guy's Cradle, things like that. Not necessary. If you have them, chuck them in, or proxy them, do whatever you like. But otherwise, this is really just as a guide for a good direction to take the deck. You'll be able to tune up or down the list as well, depending on the power level of your group. I would just recommend sort of working out that amongst yourself and going from there. So taking the cues, for what they're worth. So let's have a look at the first part. So you would have realized with this commander, the commander is all about casting big creatures. So we've got a lot of creature spells in our deck. So we've got the payoffs being the Eldrazi. So we've got Ulamog's, we've got Kozilek, and then we've got a few other things like Void Winnower, Decimator of Provinces, Artisan of Kozilek, and Conduit of Ruin. All of those are our sort of big payoff creatures, really, really useful just in general for having those, those win cons. A lot of them are indestructible and also have on cast triggers, so super, super useful. But we'll start from the top. So we've got, I'll point out Elvish Spirit Guide and Simian Spirit Guide. I've put them in with the 0 drops purely because they're actually just fast mana for the most part in our deck. But the advantage of having fast mana like this in our deck is that if we're not looking to cast something, for a colored pip early and ramping something out, just casting it late game as the creature side of it is going to give those counters to Animar. A few other 0 drops, we've got Endless One, Hangerback Walker, Stonecoil Serpent, Ugin's Conjurant, and Walking Ballista, and Shifting Wall. So all of these basically, you can cast them for free later on, as soon as there's a +1 counter on, and in the instance for Walking Ballista and Hangerback Walker, 2 +1 counters on Animar. As soon as you've got counters on them, you can cast those for free, and they'll just continue to add more counters onto Animar. So they're kind of like sort of rampy cantrip type things. We've got a few dorks. We've got Arbor Elf, Birds of Paradise, Elvish Mystic, Finhorn, Llanowar Elves. All really great. And then we've got Elvish Reclaimer that kind of serves to be a dork, but more of a land tutor. And then Allosaurus Shepherd, which is a bit of protection, so stopping your spells getting countered. And then it also has the added benefit of being a pump spell in some instances. We've got a weird one here with Merce Grappling, so it's a Modern Horizons 2. I'm not sure if it was a reprint or if it was its first printing, but it reads as a sacrifice Mere Scrappling, put a 1/1 counter on target creature. So this actually pumps you for 2 in Animar, so super useful for Animar in that respect. We've got Ragavan, which is another 1 drop. Obviously, it's going to be ramping for your treasure tokens, but just getting that dash each turn is also just another way to just add a +1 counter each turn rather than casting it just the once. Shrieking Drake. So Shrieking Drake is really cool. So it reads, when Shrieking Drake comes into play, return a creature you control to its owner's hand. So if you have Shrieking Drake, you can just pay 1 blue to add a counter onto Animar every turn. So super, super useful. You just have leftover mana at the end of your turn, and you're like, okay, cool, I'll just play it twice, put 2 more counters on Animar, and Bob's your uncle. Rounding out the last 2, we've got Tinder Wall and Wild Cantor. Both of these kind of serve the same purpose of creating a counter for Animar, but then adding temporary ramp as a sacrifice as well. So super sweet cards in this deck. So Tinder Wall, you sacrifice it to add 2 red to your mana pool, so it's kind of like a weird ritual of some sort. And Wild Cantor is literally just it's like a mini Manamorphose on a creature. So you sacrifice it, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So really cool there. Coming up to the 2-drops, we've got Beast Collar Savant, we've got Bloom Tender, we've got Cloud of Fairies. All of these are basically just, dorks or quote-unquote free spells. Sakura Tribelder, another good example of a free spell. And then we've got Sylvan Caryatid and Wall of Blossoms as the other 2 sort of, ramp defender and drawing cards there. For our more techie pieces, we've got Dockside Extortionist. Should be enough about that. You can find out about him everywhere and anywhere. And Hydroid Krasis. So you pay X and you gain half life and draw half X cards. And it enters with X+1 counters on it. So, excuse me, super useful, super fun card. And really useful in this kind of deck where, if you've got 5 counters on Animar and then you cast him for X is 10, it's just absolutely insane value drawing a full grip of cards. Spellskite, bit of protection on a dude that also ramps, and because it's just colorless, it could often be free to cast, so super useful. Destiny Spin is another sort of protection piece, so you can also use it as the win con, but it's not really that great. In this deck when we don't have a whole lot of enchantments, but it's really just for that protection for all of your creature spell. With our 3-drops, we have Eternal Witness, Imperial Recruiter, Professional Facebreaker. These are just great cards. So Ewit to get cards back from your graveyard, Imperial Recruiter to search for specific creatures. Professional Facebreaker is just great in this kind of deck because a lot of our previous, our lower drops, so our 1s and our 2s, not all of them are dorks. So that just means that, you're not always going to be attacking with them. Attacking with the Sakura Tribelder is like kind of cool. You attack into it and then sacrifice it. You still get the, you can still sacrifice it if it gets blocked. And if it doesn't get blocked, you get that treasure token. So really cool with stuff like that. Ancestral Statue is just a great way to continue to ramp, but you also get to return a non-land permanent that you control to your hand, so you can double up on those ETBs and have a great time with all of that. Solemn Simulacrum, a similar story, just drawing a card, putting a land into play, all of that kind of stuff is super relevant on a colorless body. Temur Sabertooth is going to be your main sort of engine for Dockside Extortionist, but also a whole bunch of other ETBs. If you've got all of, let's say you're in a situation where Animar's got, 4 counters, 5 counters on it, you can be just paying 2 to bounce your Solemn Simulacrum each time and generating sort of mana, lands and card draw each time, super useful with that. Vizier of the Menagerie, getting access to the top of your deck is pretty useful. You can sort of plan around which creatures you want to be casting. A lot of them can be free often. I think often the biggest value for this card though is you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast creature spells, so it just adds a bit more flexibility when you've already got cost reduction from your commander. Muldrifter, the evoke on it is fantastic. I would thoroughly recommend, looking at cards like this. You're getting that extra value with Animar, so super useful. Peregrine Drake, so this can be your infinite mana generation alternative to Dockside. If you've got a few counters on your Animar and Temur Sabertooth in play, it costs you 1 to cast it, 2 to bounce it, and you should be untapping 5 lands. So yeah, super useful with that. Wandering Archaic, just a nice value piece on a body. Conduit of Ruin lets you search for your bigger creatures, so whenever you cast Conduit, you can search for a 7-drop or greater, reveal it and put it into your hand, and then the first creature spell you cast costs 2 less each turn. Duplicant is a piece of removal as well as a big dude generator, so you can exile target non-token creature and then it becomes a copy, sort of. So as long as the card exiled with Duplicant is a creature card, Duplicant has the power, toughness, and creature types of the last creature card exiled with Duplicant. It's still a shapeshifter. So yeah, you kind of remove their big thing, your guy becomes a pseudo copy of it, and you go from there. Hullbreaker Horror, look, this one's just really sweet. Whenever you cast a spell, choose up to one, return target spell you don't control, and return it to its owner's hand, or return target non-permanent to its owner's hand. So we will get into some of the cool loops that you can do with one of our artifact engines that we'll go into on the next screen. We'll just look at the last few ones here. So we've got Meteor Golem, destroy target non-land permanent and opponent control. So, you know, it's often free with Animar. Palinchron, similar situation to the Peregrine Drake, except you don't even need the Team of Sabertooth, because this one you can pay to bounce it himself. Lastly, we've got our big beater. So Artisan of Kozilek, it's just an Annihilator spell, you know, and when you cast it, you can return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So, you know, you can get another big booty from the battlefield that's been removed. So it's really sweet, and it's an on-cast trigger, so not a resolution. Then we've got Void Winnower, where your opponents can't even. Decimator of Provinces is kind of like the poor man's alternative to Craterhoof Behemoth, but it's also an on-cast trigger, and it's purely colorless, so you can cast it for colorless for free, which is pretty sweet. Gives your creatures trample and +2/+2 until end of turn, so really sweet there. The last three everyone would have seen, Kozilek, Ulamog, and Ulamog. They just do big stuff, big Eldrazi stuff. Next up we have the instants, the artifacts, the enchantments, and the planeswalkers. So we're actually running 0 sorceries in this deck. It's just the combination of these cards. So we've got Heroic Intervention, Deflecting Swat, and Fierce Guardianship. Now I should stress that all three of these are defensive spells. You know, sometimes you're going to want to counter something else or deflect something else. I thoroughly would recommend this being a way to protect your commander. That's what you want them there for. Nothing else. Planeswalkers, we've got Domri. It adds another way for your creatures to not be countered. And then we've got the 2 Vivians, so you've got flash for your creatures, and then you've got access to the top of your deck as well as a whole bunch of other things. Enchantments, we've got Hardened Scales, just really fun card for Animar, so it can sort of double the effectiveness of each creature, so he gets real big real fast. Confounding Conundrum, I just really like this card. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, if that player had another land enter the battlefield under their control this turn, they return a land they control to its owner's hand. So, and it also cantrips. So I just think this one's a fun card. I reckon more people should be playing it. I think it's sweet. Impact Tremors, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, deals 1 damage to each opponent. So eventually we're going to get to a point where we can play Bouncy House, and this is a win condition. Growing Rights of Itlamok is a Gaia's Cradle on the backside, so really, really sweet when you have, 51 creatures in your deck. It's a huge number. Rhythm of the Wild, another non-counter, but also haste enabler on your creatures. But you know, for your Animar, it actually just enters with a +1 counter, so that's heaps sweet. Team Ascendancy creates haste and gives a card draw whenever you have a power 4 enter the battlefield. Lastly, for our artifacts, we have Skullclamp, the Ozolith, and Cloudstone Curio and Great Henge. The Ozolith is really just about saving, you know, those counters if they ever get removed. Skullclamp is just card draw when you don't need the dorks anymore. Cloudstone Curio is a really interesting one in this deck. So, you know, you can basically get to a point where you could be, you know, casting unlimited Ulamogs and Kozileks for free. And bouncing them each time, you know, with this card eventually. It's super sweet for a lot of decks. It's a big combo piece. You could also go deeper into it and play Allurin as well. You know, that's another cool card for doing stuff like this. But yeah, I just find it great. We've got the Great Henge. It's getting up there in terms of its cost these days, but I just think it's a really great card for a deck where you've got big booties. It can often just be this really, really cheap mana rock that comes down, and it gives you a bit of sustain with life. You put extra counters on the creature, and you draw cards whenever you cast creatures, so really, really good there. Lastly, we have lands, so it shouldn't be a shock for anyone looking at this land base. We've got your Your Guy's Cradle is really the only big one that sticks out. Eye of Ugin is another one. Everything else is just color access and fetch lands. We're playing Eldrazi Temple for the Eldrazi, Fiery Islet and Waterlogged Grove for the additional card draw. But, you know, there's lots of ways that you could build a land base. I opted for something that was just going to give us an insane amount of consistency. That's really all we want in a deck like this. We just basically never have to worry about our mana base. You know, all of our spells are pretty sort of forgiving in terms of their pip cost, so that's the idea with that. So we just want to have a mana base that's not going to fail us. We don't want to sort of stumble. If we get our commander removed, we want to be able to cast him again straight away and not sort of, you know, have to get gummed up with a whole bunch of cards in our hand. So that's really what we're looking at. The only thing that's probably, like, you know, the thing that you want to consider removing if you don't own it is probably the Cradle. And if you do have dual lands, by all means chuck them in. You can swap them for the Battle Bond lands or anything you like. It's super easy in and out with that. That's pretty much the deck now. I think it's really great that these kinds of cards got reprinted into Double Masters too. It gives a lot more players the opportunity to build these cards, and maybe having more eyes on the commander is always great. So yeah, if you like the deck tech, or if there's any cards that you think I've missed that really should be in Animar, you know, give us a comment and let me know. But yeah, thanks so much for checking out the video, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.